Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is the Question Guy podcast. And we're in season two, and you know I like saying that because we've come a long way from season one, episode one. And I'm here with Willy Wood, and he is an education consultant. Do I got that right?
Well, I help education consultants. I was an educational consultant myself for a long time. Now I support educational consultants with their
So,
business.
so what's going on in education, and why is that important? But before we do that, let's hear some of your backstory. So, how did you get to where you were to where you are now, and why is that important for you?
Okay, I'll do a quick version of about 35 years here. So
I appreciate that.
I started off as a teacher, an English teacher, um, high school, and then university level, and then back to high school and back to university um, for 14 years in total. And then I went to grad school for 5 years. I went back and forth a couple times, but 5 years doing PhD work in creative writing. And also during that time, I taught classes at the university level. And then I was the language arts consultant for our State Department of Education in Missouri. So that was primarily helping K to 12 teachers with instructional issues and curriculum issues and assessment and so on. So I did that for 5 years. Then I went out on my own as an independent educational consultant, and primarily that was doing workshops for teachers in school districts around the country and also presenting at conferences. And my primary area of focus was what was called then brain compatible teaching. Now it's more often called mind, brain, and education. But basically, how does the human brain learn best, and what teaching practices best match up with how the brain learns? So, what are the most effective teaching practices? So, I did that for 18 years, and
You did brain compatible teaching training?
yeah, for
Wow.
18 years, and language arts stuff as well, reading and writing workshops as well, but primarily the brain stuff. um, that was during that time, early on in that time, the brain was really hot as a topic for teachers. It's not
It's
so
not
much
anymore.
anymore.
Well,
uh,
that doesn't make any sense to me.
it doesn't to me either, but you know, the way things go in education is topics come along and become the new hot thing,
Hmm.
and then they kind of people reach a point where they feel like, I've been there, done that, know that, don't need it anymore. Even though most of the things that the research says about the brain and effective learning practices has never really been implemented in most places. But people kind of moved on from that and to other things now. And so toward the end of that 18 years, as some of the topics that I'm primarily interested in teaching about became less hot for the education market, I started thinking about what's the next chapter going to be. And
For
so
school or for you?
for me,
Oh, okay.
so to kind of introduce that, we kind of have to rewind back to the beginning of those 18 years. And the aha moment I had is the same aha moment that most educational consultants have, and that is you launch your independent educational consulting business, and shortly thereafter, at some point, it hits you. I don't know the first thing about running a business, and yet I am now in business. So,
So that's a big hiccup.
yeah, and somehow you think you would see that coming, but you don't. And it's a very common story. And so for for years, I basically went through. I took a lot of trainings, a lot of online courses, spent a lot of money to learn things about marketing and copywriting and content writing and so on. Luckily, being a language arts person, the writing part was easy, but all the business stuff I had to learn. And about 4 years ago, not long before the pandemic, with um, the topics I had been presenting are being less popular and me kind of thinking, what's next? I decided to put together my experience as an educational consultant and also specifically all the stuff I had to learn as far as running a business and start a business where I would offer help to other education consultants in growing and running their businesses. So that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years.
Well,
Yeah,
so I need to stop you because that's a lot.
yeah,
And
it's a
my
lot.
brain is still wheeling from all of that. So can we talk about that then? Because I'm really now intrigued, and I think some of our earlier conversations before today kind of focused on the problems or the hurdles. I don't, I tend to want to shy away from the word problem, but the hurdles that people have when they do what you're talking about, opening up a business or opening up a coaching or consultancy type of business. And I think some of that is because we we tend to want to open up our own, in in counseling or therapy when you get licensed or certified, we call it hanging your shingle, or at least that's what it used to be. 'Cause I'm kind of old.
Mhm.
Um, but when we want to go open up our own business and we're thinking, yeah, I've got this. I know who I'm going to talk to. I know who my niche client is, and because I've been there, done that. But I don't think that's going to get you where you want to go. Is that what you when you start talking with people, is that what I'm the professional, I could do this, and then they hit a roadblock.
Yeah.
Is that what
So
is that what you're saying?
yeah, and so what I think the blind spot comes from. Let me get my dog's attention here. Sorry.
Okay.
I think you said that that was a pretty big hiccup that you would launch a business and then suddenly realize you don't know how to run a business. I think
Because people go into it from their own, I got the knowledge.
exactly that. So that's what happens. There's a blind spot because here's the thinking process. First, you start off as a teacher.
Mhm.
You get an area of expertise that you become pretty good at. So you've done a lot of study in a particular area, or you have some skills, and people start coming to you as the go-to person in, say, your district. Like, go to talk to so and so. She really knows about that topic.
Mm.
And so you start sharing and become recognized, and then you start probably, generally you start sharing a little more widely to neighboring districts. Somebody says you should talk about that at this conference that's coming up. You apply, you get selected, you start speaking, and it just kind of grows organically. And you start getting excited. Oh well, I'm becoming recognized as an expert on this. And the other part of it, as far as the business part of it goes, you see other people, other educational consultants who've gone before you, the people who've written the books on your topic, your area of expertise, and
Mm.
people who talk at the conferences on your area of expertise. And you say, I can do that. I teach in front of kids every day. I could speak to adults. I could write a book and whatever it is. But you feel like that part of it will be easy. You're thinking about, I can do that.
Yeah,
Um, and
because
I've
you're the
got my
subject matter expert.
subject matter
Yeah.
expertise.
Yeah.
But then when you actually do it, you actually, start your LLC or a corporation or whatever, and it's legal. And now all of a sudden you have a whole new host of problems that you didn't anticipate. And those include all the stuff like um, taking care of taxes that you never had to think about before, and filing and invoicing and taking payments, and
So
Uh,
there's the accounting bookkeeping component.
there's that,
Yeah,
which most educational consultants start as solopreneurs, so they're not in a position where they can hire that out yet, so they kind of have to do that themselves. They have the whole thing about, okay, where do I get my next gig? The whole marketing piece of it, they generally are clueless about. Um, and most people who go out and start their own consultant business, they've got some contacts that they start off with, their close network,
right.
and but you kind of burn through those fairly quickly usually, and then you've got to get new contacts and new business, and that's when the marketing uh, kicks in, and you have to figure out how to do that. Then there's social media to do. You've got to put
Oh.
out content. Do you want to build an email list? If you do, how are you going to keep in touch with them? How often? It's just a whole host of things that just come upon you that you never thought about before. Um,
So,
so
so being an SME, so I wrote this down. Being a subject matter expert doesn't necessarily equate to being a business owner or an entrepreneur. Not in the
no,
least. Okay.
sadly, no.
Okay. So so do people come to you for help, or are you in that same kind of situation where now that you're the consultant of consultants, do you seek out those people who are in that situation? And how do you go
Yeah,
about doing that?
yeah, a little of both. So I started this business 3 or 4 years ago, and my first thought would be that it would just be a service business, and that I would do certain things for other educational consultants that they didn't want to do or didn't have the skill set to do. And specifically things like writing their lead generation magnets, or ghost writing an ebook for them, or uh, ghost writing their blog, or things like that, just particular one-off projects done for you services, and I do
Right.
some of that. But it also has kind of morphed into there's a bigger population out there than I thought, of people who wanted coaching and were okay with learning all of this stuff, but they wanted more of a shortcut to get there. Somebody to kind of hold their hands and say, okay, now do this, now do that. And instead of trying to read 100 books and take 100 online courses and figure it out totally by themselves.
Right. Right.
So I have added the coaching element to it more recently. Just basically whatever they need, I'm trying to provide for them. But to get back to your question, some people do come to me from various avenues, and other people I have to seek out. So I have to, I'm building my own marketing to reach out to people as well. And it's a little bit of both.
So I think with any type of business, the critical hurdle is, I think what you said, after your initial, your immediate circle of connections runs dry in terms of lead generation and new clients. I think that's the critical element that most people want to know about is how do I get that next client? Are there secrets to getting new clients, or literally getting that next client that you
Yeah,
could?
well, there are processes. I wouldn't necessarily call them secrets. And with the internet, everything's out there. All the information you possibly could need. It's just a matter of finding it and being
You
able to
gotta
consume.
find it and filter through it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, there's stages of business growth that entrepreneurs go through, especially this, what I call this expert business model that consultants are trying to navigate. And generally, there's actually a stage before the one that you just identified. Usually, the first big hurdle, we don't want to use the problem word, right?
Right. I
Uh,
didn't want to.
the first big challenge for most people when they're first starting is to really figure out their ideal customer, who it is they're trying to serve, what those people's problems are, and what your
Mhm.
offer is going to be. What's your solution that you can offer to them?
Really, that's the
And
first challenge is they don't have
that's
a clear
Yeah, and
picture?
they don't, and
Okay.
it's they think they do, and that's the root of the problem. So
Well, how clear does that picture need to be?
very clear.
Okay.
I'll tell you the process in general that I walk people through that was very helpful for me, and a lot of business coaches use this, so this is not original to me. But the first problem, I keep using that word, the first
First,
challenge
first
that
challenge. Okay.
they run into is, and they discover it this way usually. Um, they know what their subject matter expertise is. They know they need a website, so they throw up a website and they tell the world who they are and here's what I do, and publish that to the internet, and then they sit and nothing happens.
Oh,
It's just crickets. Um, and that's because they thought they knew what people wanted, and it wasn't exactly what people wanted. So
oh.
maybe people are interested in that subject area, but the solution that you're offering isn't exactly what they're needing. Um, and
Well,
it
you
could
just
also,
deflated a lot of people's egos with that.
well, they got to get over that because they will, if they're going to be successful. So what they really need to do is a couple parts here. They need to nail down in real specificity what is often called the ideal customer avatar.
Okay.
Who is that person? What keeps them up at night? What are their challenges? What solutions are they looking for? What's the transformation that they're hoping to achieve? I'm stuck in this problem right now. Here's where I want to get. How do I get there? They've got to really understand all of that
Does
to
that
nail.
include like what they look like, age, nationality?
Yeah, so it does
Um,
include. When I have people work through that, I do have them put some demographics to it, and
okay.
some of it's not guesswork. I mean, like for example, um, if you're trying to reach, if your target audience is, let's say, building administrators,
Okay.
then you can use Google to find out what's the average age of a school building administrator, what's the breakdown male female. There's a lot of demographics you can access online and start getting a little picture. And of course, you got your own experience to base some of that off of. And then there's also, well, maybe 70% of, I'm making things up, maybe 70% of building administrators are male, but maybe you're a female educational consultant who wants to work with female school leaders and help them over some very specific challenges. Well, then you're not going to make your avatar male just because 70% of the school administrators are male. You're going to focus on that 30% and make your avatar female because that's who you want to speak to.
Mhm.
And what I get people to try to get people to do is to actually go out and talk to people like we're talking now on a Zoom call, as many people in their target market as they can, record it, run the generator for the transcript, so you have the actual words that they said. And so you're not only trying to have them tell you what their problems are and what solutions they're looking for, but also you want to get their exact language that they use. So what's often called the problem language. You want to say, okay, here's the way they're saying it. Here's what they say that they want, and here's how they say it, because that's going to be the information you want to use in your marketing materials.
So there needs to
So
be, so what I'm hearing is there need to be a time of, and we'll use this research. There needs to be a time of research.
I call these
Just
research calls. That's
okay, okay.
exactly what it is.
Oh, all right. So,
Yeah,
and
that's exactly what it is. My general question is usually, what are the three main challenges that you face in trying to build your educational consulting business? And
okay.
talk to a whole bunch of people, and then you gather that information, and that they would do it with their target market.
Mhm.
And you start
You did
looking
it with
for,
me.
Yeah, I did with you.
Yeah,
And you start looking for themes in that data, and
right.
what keeps coming up. What are the common problems, and how do people talk about those problems, and what do they say that they're looking for? The next step then is your offer, and you're going to want to, whatever you do, whether it's a workshop, a keynote, a book that you write, or a podcast that you do, whatever it is, whatever your vehicle is,
Mm.
that vehicle is going to be designed, that offer is to solve those specific problems that your target audience told you they have. Okay. You do it that way, and business will start coming. Once you create your website or whatever vehicle it is to put that out to the world. But now you're speaking their language. You're speaking directly to the people that you want to work with in their language, and you're offering something that will solve their problems. And it will, because they told you.
Right.
So it's the opposite of the way most people do it. Usually, most people will just say, I think I know what they want. Here's what they want. Put it out there, and you find out usually
Well,
that it's not what they want.
can we go back to something you said a little bit earlier, and that is you actually have to set up the calls. You actually have to target the people that you at least you think match your target niche, your target population, your target avatar, and
Right.
then do research calls with them.
Mhm.
Now, that may sound simple in strategy, or is it simple in strategy? Because you, I've told you that what I'm doing now has been an evolution. So about a year or so ago, a little bit more than a year ago, so 14 plus months, I started having conversations with people all over the world. And so it wasn't even about developing a brand or a business or anything like that. For me, it was the need to connect, to have those relationships and build those relationships with, and I've done that. I've done that, not with, I haven't done it with the whole world yet, still doing that part,
You're
but I've
working
had
on it.
conversations with a lot of people all over the place, you included. But for you or for what you're talking about, it's very much a target. So can you target that like on LinkedIn? Can you put in filters on
Yeah.
LinkedIn and target that profile?
Yeah. And
How does
so,
that
and
work?
you can,
Okay.
and actually, and I do use a LinkedIn process for this, and then that will set you up for the second stage. But this is the first stage. So yeah, and it is a challenge because if you don't already have a network of connections, then you have to build that network even just to get to the first step of talking to people. So
Yeah, yeah.
so yeah, so with LinkedIn, for example, I won't give you the whole process, but basically, several times a week, I'll reach out to a certain number of people on LinkedIn that match I think, my target audience. So you'll see on LinkedIn the descriptions of what the people's jobs are. So for me, my target audience being educational consultants, obviously those are people I'm looking for on there. But then also some people kind of around the bullseye would be, if I see that somebody maybe is a curriculum director, or maybe they're a instructional coach, but they've written a book or something like that. There's certain people who haven't quite launched themselves out into business as an education consultant yet, but you can tell they're the kind of person who might, or is kind of getting ready to do so.
Mm.
So those I will also connect with a bunch of those as well. But basically, I just say, I saw your website, I saw your profile on LinkedIn. You look like an interesting person that I'd like to get to know. And uh, let's connect, let's talk. And a certain percentage will just ignore you. A certain
Really?
percentage will connect, and just that's it. You connect, and it doesn't go anywhere from there. But another percentage will come back to you and ask about your business. I always drop a link to my website in there. I don't say anything about it. I don't try to push it, but I drop it in just in case they're interested in checking out what I do.
Mhm.
And then a lot of people will get back to me, and then I use CRM software just to remind me that, hey, this person showed a little bit of interest. Circle back to them in a month or two, and I use that to keep me kind of on the ball and connecting with people. And what happens is, without being pushy or salesy, some of those connections will start to develop into more of a relationship, and then possibly into a business relationship. So sometimes it takes, I've been in this business for 4 years. I've had people connect with me recently to become coaching clients who I've been just sending out messages on LinkedIn for like 3 years, along the lines of just checking in to see how it's going, and all of a sudden they will come back and say, hey, do you do this? And I was to say, yeah, I do that. Let's jump on a call and see if, and talk about it. And, it might develop into a client. And then sometimes it happens real quick. I had a lady join as a coaching client recently. I think it had only been it was the second or third contact, but usually it takes a lot longer. And then, I follow up with them, and then, do whatever it is that they need done for them in their business, whether it's coaching or something done for them. So that's kind of the process to get a client in the
Okay.
first place. Yeah. And to reach out to people and start doing the research calls as well.
So how do you make it sustainable? So I'm beginning to talk about, because I just wrote a book. So
Mhm.
I just wrote a book, and it took the entire year, this whole year, basically 2022, was for me wrapped around doing much of what you're talking about, really clarifying, who might be that specific target. And so me and some colleagues are focused on uh, emerging leaders, and that's what we're calling them. People who are thinking about stepping into maybe not so much entrepreneurship or business ownership, but that could be a piece of it, but leadership in general. So whether it's the faith community, the business community, industry, or whatever, how do you design, how do you think about leadership? And then on top of that, from a specific model, and we're using social consciousness. So we're talking about collaboration, sustainability, and values as being your pillars of how you're going to think about leading, or how you're going to think about leadership moving forward. And so I wrote a book around it. I use a narrative to provide instruction around that, and then a Q&A component. So with that, I do talk about sustainability. To be successful in what you're talking about, running a business, you have to establish some type of sustainability. And I
Mhm.
think earlier you talked about you have to put systems in place. Are there critical, so my question with all that is, are there specific critical systems that coaches or consultants in your space need to have in place in order to make their business successul? That's really my
Yes.
question. And that was a
So,
very complicated question, and I do apologize.
and my answer is yes.
Okay. Well, I appreciate
You want
that.
me to expand
That's
on
a,
that?
yeah, that simplifies everything. Yeah. Well,
Um,
can you
so
identify some of those systems that
yeah,
need to be in
yeah.
place?
So we talked a little bit about. So I look at it in terms of 4 stages of business growth, and what I just was talking about, that beginning thing of nailing down who you're talking to and what to offer. That's stage one.
Mhm.
Um, then that gets you a little bit of business. But before I get to answer your question, because you're in stage three, is
Wow.
I'll talk about
Sustainability
stage.
is stage three?
Yeah, I'll talk about stage two just real quick,
Okay.
because what happens when you finally nail down your offer and your avatar, um, your next problem, you reach a plateau. Your next problem is, I don't have enough people that know that I'm here.
Right.
So stage two is all about scaling up your marketing and your sales process to bring more of those people in, make more people aware of your offer. And basically, stage 1 and 2 together. The goal, the big picture goal, is to build kind of some cash reserves and a cash runway so that you're ready to scale up in stage 3. So you start in stage 2. One of the things, and there's going to be marketing processes that you're going to have to put in place. You're going to have to get good at the sales process. Once your marketing brings some people in, you have a sales call with them. You have to get good at doing those, so you actually turn the leads into clients.
Mhm.
And you need to start at that stage also building a list. So list building is big there, because you're trying to scale up the pool of people that you can let know about your efforts that are coming up. So one of the problems that people run into is they try to skip over stage 1 and 2 and go straight to stage 3 sometimes. And what that looks like is a consultant will come out and start their business, and the very first thing they want to do is write a book.
Well, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, the problem is they don't have an audience for that book yet. If they've skipped stage 1 and 2, they don't have anybody to make aware of the book. So what happens a lot of times is it just kind of drops out into the middle of the ocean and makes a little bit of a splash and disappears for good. I was talking to a client recently, and she has 480 books in her garage that she needs to somehow get rid of. So that's what happens when you don't build that runway and that network and that list before you start scaling up. So basically, stage 1 and 2, generally you want to start with high touch, low volume work. So like really working with people one-on-one or in very small groups and intensely, and really helping them. So it's low volume, but you can offer those kind of services, consulting, coaching, and so on, for a decent price tag, so you can start making some money doing that.
Mhm.
But then you can't scale that, because once you get towards the end of stage 2, now you have a different problem, and that is enough people know about you for you to be getting enough work, and now you can't serve any more clients than you currently are. So you have a time restriction. You can only do high touch with a certain number of people. That's it. So then you get to the point where, okay, now you have to scale. Now you have to change over, not change over, but add on top of what you've been doing, a new layer of high volume, low touch stuff. And that's where writing a book comes in. That's where
A course, an
an
e-course, or
online
uh-huh.
course would come in, and so on, or actually probably a series of online courses. But that's scalable. The coaching work really isn't at a certain point, but then you have something where you can serve more people, but they can do more of the work themselves, and it takes less of your time to do it. So you've got the time to create the course and write the book and so on, that you have to invest. But at that point, then you can put systems in place to market and sell those things, and you can serve a lot more people. And the limit on how much you can make in your business can rise substantially at that point. So that's stage 3. And events. You also mentioned you have a conference that you're running around your new topic. And so you're doing several stage 3 kind of scaling up types of ventures to to sell the ideas that you've written about. So that's stage.
And so some thoughts that come to my mind was, when I'm on LinkedIn and I notice people talk about that stage 3 component, and they might not call it stage 3, but we know that that's what they're talking about, that scale. You got to scale.
Mhm.
Um, People then, and I've had conversations with some of these people saying, well, the next thing I'm going to do, or the next thing I'm going to tell my clients to do, is to increase their cost. So if they're whatever their service is, at $2,000, double it, $4,000. So instead of having to work more hours because there's only so many hours a day, they're increased, hopefully, their value so they could up their cost. And so whatever they were making last year, they could double it if they retain the same number of clients the following year. They just double their profits. Is that something that you talk about, or is it really just kind
Um,
of scaling from a perspective of, well, let's do some workshops, let's do some book, let's
so
get on stage?
you can do both.
Okay.
The how much to charge is a whole area that's a big discussion by
Okay.
itself. Generally, people in education, my field, tend to undervalue themselves. So I do often have to push people to raise prices because they're undervaluing. Now, a little insight here, I also run an annual teachers conference. So I'm in a position from that conference of having to hire the speakers. So I know what people are asking for their speaking fee. And it's all over the place. It ranges from $1,000 for a day to $75,000 for an hour. But most people are way down on the bottom end of that range.
Okay.
And in doing this for 25 years, I know that they rarely talk to each other about their prices. So they don't know what other people are charging. They're just guessing. And most of them, I think in education, we have this mindset that we're givers, and we a lot of people
But
feel
that's
bad
not
about
sustainable
asking.
business.
It's not. And so they kill themselves, doing a mind-numbing amount of presentations over the course of the year, and it never really adds up to something that's a very big number.
Mhm.
So I do have to talk to people about prices, and usually about raising prices. That said, you can't raise price unless you're providing value. You
Right,
can't
right.
just all of a sudden say, I'm going to give you $2,000 worth of services, and I'm going to charge you $5,000 for it. People are going to go, no.
Well, you have to work up to that credential.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So you have to provide the value. But if you do that, then yes, you can raise prices to a certain point. You can also only scale that so much. But you really have to scale what you offer to people. So one concept we really haven't talked about, but has kind of been implied in this whole conversation, is what's often called the customer value journey, which just means if somebody enters your business as a customer, what are you going to offer them at the very beginning?
Mm.
And then once they've consumed that and they want more, what's the next thing that you can offer them, next thing that they need, or the next problem that you can solve for them? And then what's the next thing, and what's the next thing? So if somebody comes into my business as a as a client for coaching, I can help them with that. But then what's the next thing? And I haven't scaled to stage 3 yet in this new business. So I'm going to be entering that stage soon, where I'm going to be in the process of creating online courses and so on to help them with the next stage. In an educational consultants business, they usually start off by offering workshops or keynote presentations. Usually it's speaking, going into school districts, doing presentations and consulting. And again, you're limited by how much time you have and how much of that you can do. But then, if you write a book, start running your own event, create online courses and so on, you can serve a whole lot more people, and you can make more money by scaling it that way. But you also run into another problem at stage 3, and that is you usually have to start hiring some people to help, because your time is, you're still doing some of the stage 1 and 2, high touch stuff.
Mhm.
But now you're offering these other things, and you have to create those materials. You just spent a year writing a book, right?
Mhm.
I wrote a book once, it took me a year to write as well. So I know there's a big time investment there, but then you still have to keep doing your marketing. You have to do social media. You have to, there's all these other things, and you reach a point where you can't do all of that.
Right.
So at that point, you have to bring in help, whatever that looks like. It could just be something as simple as a part-time VA.
Bookkeeper. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bookkeeper is a good first one to hire.
Yeah.
A lot of it can be done just by subcontracting with freelancers. Some of the stuff can be done that way.
Mhm.
Or you may go to a full-time employee or two, but the revenue coming in has to justify and pay for that
Right.
and
Right.
leave a profit for you. But you reach this point where you have to have help during stage 3.
So
So
go,
yeah,
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, we've talked a lot about how to really structure this, and I think there has been so much value here in this conversation alone that I'm almost willing to say, let's talk about stage 4 in another conversation, because I think there's going to be power there, for you and for the audience who's watching, listening. And so with that, are there are you just focused? Well, you I guess you have to be the the educational marketing consultant who's needing coaching to get things done the right way. You're the man for the job.
I try to be.
Okay, well, that's all we got. So any final words of advice before we kind of check out for this conversation? Because I want to put your contact information in the description. And when this goes public, I would like for the people who watch and listen to really know that you're there for them and that they need to contact you. But before we, are there, what would be that word of how do I usually say, but this is not that conversation, a word of hope, a word of encouragement, but really, I guess for this conversation, a word of focus would be appropriate as we end the conversation.
Yeah. So if there are education consultants out there who see this, um, first of all, their situations are all different. They all need different kinds of help, but there are some generalities, like we've been talking about, kind of phases of business growth
Mhm.
and so on, that are pretty much universal. One of the things that I do that is helpful to some education consultants is the fact that I've been in education my whole career. So I've lived the independent consultant life for 18 years. So I've kind of been there and done that and know specifically some of the challenges they run into. I have had some people come over to me as coaching clients from other coaches do not have an educational background,
Okay.
who are excellent business coaches, but they had trouble relating to the specific challenges of somebody in education, because there are differences as well. So that's something that I do understand and kind of can at least empathize with and help them through those challenges. And also it depends on the kind of help you want. And some people, like I say, I do done for you things for some people who just can do everything else, but they want a book written, let's say, and they want me to ghostwrite it for them,
Mhm.
and they want their name on a book, but they don't want to write it, or
Yeah.
they feel that they're not a strong writer.
Yeah.
So that may just be all they need, is just something done for them, and I can do that. But other people they really want to learn how to run their own business, and they don't want really somebody else to do it for them. They just want somebody to tell them how to do it, what steps to take, in what order. And so that's where the coaching comes in. So you really need to find the help that matches your needs, and not just some one size fits all kind of program.
Well, I think that's the focus that we needed. Willy Wood, thank you so much for being a guest on the Question Guy podcast. And for those
Well,
who are listening and watching, we'll see you next time. Take care.
do you want me to throw in my URL?
Yeah, go ahead.
You can edit it in. It's www.edconsultantmarketing.com.
And I'll put that in the description. We'll see you next time. Take
All right.
care.